Does anyone want to start with anything, or got anything they want to share? Hi, Christine. Oh.
I've got quite an interesting testimony from yesterday.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. We're running right. I'm on mute, but it's echoing back at me. Sorry, I'm on my earphones, but it's really echoing.
Okay. No.
Okay. Is that better? Not quite sure. Okay, so see this. I don't know if you can see it. It's a Fibonacci drawing. Yeah? Can you hear me? I can't hear you now. I can't hear you.
I've muted myself so that it won't echo.
All right.
Basically.
So I was we're running a small group once a month on a Sunday afternoon to encourage people to encounter God prophetically and hear from God. And a guy pitched up yesterday afternoon that I've never met before, and we were asked to draw a picture of and give it to someone prophetically, just as an exercise, because it's very shallow end stuff. And he drew this picture and gave it to me, which completely blew my mind, really, because he then explained that, and Mike, he knows nothing about what you've been teaching. And he said, in the center is my spirit, and the circles around the outside are my soul and my body, and then there were gateways that the river of life could flow through. And it was just so exciting, because not because particularly that I got it, but because he was talking language that he'd never been taught. He just got it from the Lord. So, but everybody there, I was kind of explaining why it was, important, and about the Engaging God program and stuff like that. And it was just really an amazing moment that God is supernaturally giving these pictures and understandings and revelation to people supernaturally. You've got no grid for it whatsoever. Interestingly, he's local to here. He's from Thurrock, and really, really interesting guy, because I got to chat to him afterwards. But he's got no paradigm for this, no kind of teaching or anything. He just got it straight from God yesterday afternoon, which was really, really encouraging for this area. So I'm going to hook up with him and connect up with him, and perhaps he'll come along again to the prophetic encounter group that we're running. But it was just really, just like such a confirmation from God. It was really lovely. So even in the little things, he knows what we need to hear. So really good. I still can't hear you, Mike, now. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and when you think of what's going on in the spiritual realm, and calling sounds of heaven being released, calling into that sort of old order, and people who are sort of not necessarily have heard this stuff before, then that's the evidence of it, because that is totally supernatural. For that guy to come up with that, it was definitely God speaking. But God wasn't just doing that in isolation. It's because you've been doing your stuff. You're releasing a sound for your own life. The group that you're drawing together is because you're wanting to engage people and open their hearts and minds to the truth and what God's doing. And I think that's what we have to see more and more. We have to start legislating that. For that was the first thing for him, to pull back the veil, to see something new. And if he can sort of then think, hey, God's spoken to me about that, now I need to pursue that, then the next aspects of that flow, because where's the river of life flowing from? I mean, that's the key in this. Okay, well, where is it coming from? Well, it's flowing out of heaven. Well, do you think you can go back in through where it's flowing and engage heaven then? And those are the next sort of the steps that open up once someone's begun to hear the sound in his spirit. There's a deep crying to deep, and that deep crying to deep experience is what will, in essence, enable him to encounter these type of things. Because that's what we're seeing all over. When I sort of issued the blue light and things like that, and people then started testifying that blue lights came into their room and started engaging them and different things. It's all part of the same paradigm. You do something in the realms of heaven, and you just trust that what you do will outwork. I think just God is calling us to be more focused in what we do. So let's start, sending those sounds out. I mean, how did the guy even get to come to your group? Something drew him, so something in his spirit is drawing.
Yeah, and actually, it's relationship.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because it's cross-cultural as well. And we've been working quite a lot on that stuff in the heavenlies and here as well. So, and he's co-pastors a church in a nearby borough. Really interesting. So a relational foundation there, which is really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is definitely the key into everything that we're doing. It has to be relational. There's a danger that if people engage structurally and just do something in a structural way, it will be like sticking a new patch on an old wineskin. And unfortunately, just because people have had experiences of new things doesn't necessarily mean that they've let go of the old. And when it comes to engaging relationally with people, we are exactly doing the relationship. It's the relationship which is what counts. Everything flows out of that relationship. There is no structure that we're setting up to, okay, oh, you've come to my group now, I'm over you, and now I'm over your church. But that's the old way. And it's still, unfortunately, it's still going on. People who really shouldn't be functioning that way are, and it's still a control system, really, which is not what we want. We want relationship, support, encouragement, getting alongside each other, helping each other on our journeys, without any form of, well, I'm going to come and tell you you should do this, or I'm going to come and tell you what God is saying. Again, what you were doing is helping them hear what God was saying, and then when they did, it was like, wow, isn't that amazing? So it's awesome. And I think we do have to be really careful that in what we're doing is established on a new foundation, and it's a new wineskin. We need a new wineskin for new wine, and just having the terminology doesn't make it new. So I would encourage you to test everything, and test it in the spirit to whether your spirit resonates with it as something new, rather than, okay, this is using the right language, but when you look at it, the same spirit isn't behind it. Because anyone can talk about a bench of three, anyone can talk about heavenly government or chancellorship or any of that stuff, but actually, what is the fruit of it? Is the fruit of it something which is new, or is the fruit of it old? And if it brings any sort of fear or control, then it's a mixture. And we have to be coming from something new, not old. I know we're all in transition and we get challenged and our mindsets gets challenged, but I would encourage you just to be open to question, not in a negative way, but just to make sure just that the spirit behind what someone is saying resonates with your spirit, rather than the words that they say. And I encourage people, anyone who hears anything I say, don't just accept it just because I said it. Make sure God says it to you. Make sure it's God and the spirit behind it speaking to you, and you're in agreement. And if it's like, oh, I'm not really sure about that, well, then just go back and ask God later. Because we really want to make sure that we are embracing what God is saying and doing, not just what someone else has said. And I think for a lot of people, their understanding of the Christian faith, majority of it has come from what someone else has told them, rather than what they've experienced themselves. And I would be a very interesting survey to go into a church setting and ask people, a series of questions about this, 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 and this, and say, well, where did you get to know what you know about that? Where did it come from? And I would say probably well over 90%, if not approaching more than that. People would say, oh, because of a sermon, someone says, or because I was taught by our pastor, or the church taught me that, or the previous church I was in, or when I was brought up, I was told. It would mostly be someone else actually giving them information, and what they actually have is exactly that, information, which is why so many people within the sort of church system go around saying, well, I know it in my head, but I don't know it in my heart. Because actually, well, you never got it in your heart, because you never actually got it from God direct, who spoke it into your heart. You just listened to somebody else and accepted what they said without actually finding out if it was true. I mean, it's the whole thing with the Bereans. Let's go and search the scripture and find if this was true. Now, I'm not saying you just got to go and search the Bible, but you go to God and you say, God, is this you? And I want a personal revelation of what this is. Just imagine if we had actually have a personal experience of every sermon we've ever heard. It would be so different from what we've got. And the whole church would be a totally different place.
That would be awesome.
But that's the whole point of hearing something. Isn't so you will believe what the person said and just accept it. It will inspire you to say, I want that revelation for myself. And the same things, how many people go around to prophetic conferences and they want people to lay hands on them and get the anointing because it's from somebody else, rather than I'm going to go to God and I'm going to ask God for him to give me that in my life. So it's how he wants to give it to me rather than what someone else got. But that, of course, requires some effort on our part and some perseverance and some diligence to establish that truth for ourselves. I mean, it's like, for me, I share some of the things that Ian Clayton teaches and some of the things other people teach, but I share it from my personal perspective because I have a personal revelatory experience of it. It's not theory to me. So I share it in my way because I have a testimony of how that impacted my life, and therefore I can share from authority because I have a testimony of the experience. If I was just passing on information, there would be nothing in that information other than the information. And all of us, when we're mentoring others, it's about our testimony opening up for that person, for them to have their own personal experience, rather than, okay, well, I've heard some more information, that was a good message, and I'll file it away, and then actually it won't have changed my life in any way because I won't have actually received the heart behind it that the Spirit had for me. And I know there's a lot of, I do believe that God really wants to challenge that whole mindset of just more information, listening to more and more sermons, listening to more and more tapes, listening to more and more YouTube videos, but not actually ever actually having that transformation and that truth actually be part of our lives. No, I'm not saying we shouldn't teach. I'm not saying we shouldn't, impart revelation, but it may be revelation that I'm imparting, but it isn't revelation to you until you take it and make it your own. And that's the truth. I can only impart information. For it to become revelation, you have to experience yourself. Because that's the whole understanding of the world knowledge. I only know because I've experienced, rather than I know because someone told me. And we have to see in the new order of things that change significantly, because otherwise you will just set up the same things, superstars and gurus in the new order who we listen to and we just believe because they said it, rather than those who've gone before as forerunners who are just sharing their experiences so we can actually follow and engage the experience for ourselves, so that it's not someone else saying, well, I had this wonderful experience in heaven. It's us saying, oh, I heard that testimony and the desire of my heart was set on engaging in heaven, and I actually experienced it in this way. And this is how God used that to change me and transform me and help me. So I think it's very much really a key to where we're going, that we don't just listen and accept just because someone said it, but if it resonates with us, we go and we experience it for ourselves, and if it doesn't resonate, well, then don't bother. There's no point trying to pursue something that doesn't resonate with you just because someone else said so, because you'll be in a pursuit then of knowledge rather than a pursuit of revelation and encounter. So yeah, I think it's really important that we embrace that today. But I really like that whole Fibonacci number thing of how that is expressed, because it just puts another slant on it, because God creates everything using those fractals and pi and the golden mean and everything else. So it makes sense that in essence that is how it functions. Sometimes it might be easier to draw it as a thing, but not necessarily the reality of it. So.
It's interesting, Mike, because at the end he told me, he said to me that he hadn't drawn that drawing for 40 years. Since he was a young boy, and in school they were trying to work out why there were some things he had to, and they asked him to draw a hammer, and he drew that. And I said to him, in the school they were embarrassed. And his mother was embarrassed because he couldn't draw. But I said to him, I think what you drew was the house of God in your spirit. That your spirit was drawing it. And he really welled up. And was really tenderized by what God was showing him about himself. What's interesting is he's actually a very successful man. He's a doctor, and he's never been able to draw, and he felt really bad about that. So it was for him as well, really. Fascinating.
Yeah. And I think people's creativity can be suppressed very easily at an early age when they have a negative experience that makes them feel embarrassed. I mean, that happened to me. When I was about 3 or 4, I can remember having a really negative experience of public speaking in the as a Sunday school anniversary, saying my little rhyme, and actually had a really bad experience around it. And it actually completely shut me down and created a fear of public speaking that I didn't overcome until I was 16, 17. And it went through all my childhood that I couldn't speak publicly. I was frightened of reading aloud, doing any of those things because of that experience. And just imagine if that guy was encouraged when he drew that, and that creativity was, wow, you're seeing something that no one else has ever seen here. Wow, this is so amazing. Just imagine what he could have produced in the last how many years of his life. And I think there's so many people who are suppressed like that. We have a guy here who was into music, and the same sort of thing happened. His family really wanted to encourage him to get a good job and to study and to go to university and do all that stuff. And his inside, he wanted to be a musician. And he followed their dream for him rather than his own. And it wasn't until he became a Christian that got unlocked, and his songwriting and his engagement in worship and the Spirit really began to be brought back into the light. Because we're very sensitive, and we can be crushed and influenced negatively by other people, and sometimes well-intentioned other people, but encouraging us to do what they think is right for us rather than to encourage us to go in the way that we should go. And that whole thing of Proverbs, bring up a child in the way they should go. Well, that's the way God created them to be, not the way you think they should be. How many people are in the family business who are doctors, lawyers, school teachers, because actually their parents were, and their parents were, and there is an expectation that you are. And the same thing goes down to like steel workers. I remember recently watching a thing on the TV about, you know, the closing down of steel works, and it was just like, you know, there were 3 or 4 generations of steel workers, and the expectation was this little lad of about 4, there would be no job for him because this plant was going to be shut down. Rather than, well, what's God's purpose for that little child? God may have no desire that he ever be involved in being in a steel plant. But the expectation was, this is what his job will be if this plant is still in existence. And I think so many people are molded after someone else's desire for their lives rather than their destiny as God has written it. And we have to help people to break out from those restrictions and those entanglements and those things that have come around people, and help them to become who God created them to be, you know, and help them to be transformed, to get rid of all those hindrances and mindsets and other things that are effectively shaping their lives, and they are conformed to the image that they've got from the world rather than conform to the image that comes from creation and eternity from God's heart. So yeah, really, really key in that, and I love sort of those sort of creative breakthroughs, because hopefully that will inspire him to believe, you know, and to experience that, you know. So awesome.
Mike.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mike.
Yeah.
Mike.
Hiya.
I'm just stuck in 21 days. Just trying to focus on the presence of God. In the past, I've had 2, you know, life-changing experiences. The first time I was sovereignly taken to heaven, I felt like I carried the tangible presence of God for about a week, and that was awesome. The second time, the Lord did it again. I felt I carried it about 3 or 4 weeks, and I eventually said to the Lord, "Please take this off of me." I was burning up. It was winter. I was wearing summer clothes. I just felt like I was on fire, really, for the 4 weeks. I didn't feel like I drank enough water as well. Now, I guess this is just how I'm being led in terms of, you know, really wanting to focus on this, because the Lord has really told me this year that that's the principal thing for what I believe He wants to do in this time. So, any ideas regarding this? You know, I got a revelation yesterday morning. Woke up and I felt my angel told me this, that his name is Luke, but and Luke means luminous. And all of a sudden, when I woke up yesterday morning, I knew that he had something to do with what God wants to teach me about creative light. So a part of me feels that that's part of this whole thing of the presence thing that the Lord is asking me to step into. I guess I'm asking you for practical input as to what I could do to really go into this a lot deeper, and not 4 weeks and going, "Lord, please take this off," you know, but actually moving past that.
Right. Some of it is dealing with the soul, the limitations that the soul would put on you, so that, you know, there's I can't handle this, this is too much for me, which is just the soul's fear, really, of going deeper. But in reality, I would use the encounters as a doorway to go back. You know, I would meditate around the encounter of what happened previously. I would then use that testimony to go back through that door and to re-engage it. And then, you know, specifically seek for the revelation that God is wanting to give you, and focus it. Set the desires of your heart on it. And once that is set in the desire of your heart, that will overcome any fear or obstacles, and then you will be willing to pay the cost, whatever that might be. Because there probably is a cost you know, in your own time, in your own whatever it is that's required when we come into something new or a new level. You know, I think it was Graham Cook once said, you know, there's a devil for every level, and when we come through, there's usually something we have to overcome, subdue, that enables us to deal with that. And so, in terms of creative light and things, it's like, you know, that is who you are. Your spirit is creative light. You were created out of God's spirit. God is light. And understanding creative light is very important when you come to understand time and eternity, the different realms of heaven, the different time frames of the age to come, and how that all works together. So I'm sure God's got some really excellent revelation for you to experience and release. The key is not to strive, not to try and struggle into that, but to rest in it and position yourself so that God can continue to unfold it to you. You know, everything has to come out of rest, and if you're struggling with the rest aspect of it, then that's the thing to do. Do a court case around, okay, well, why is my soul, you know, why am I saying take this off me, take this off me? You know, what is causing me to react to an increase in the intensity of God's presence in that way? Now, you know, that's not to say that physically our bodies sometimes can't cope with the experiences, which is why people fall on the floor or get on their face, simply because sometimes you just can't stand. When we first had, you know, outpourings of the Spirit and increases in the presence of God and God's glory and heaven, a lot of people couldn't stand. They just couldn't stand under the weight of that, because glory is weight. That's what the word means, weight, the weighty presence. And our musicians used to struggle to be able to continue sometimes, simply because of just the weight of the presence. Well, as they've got used to standing in that, they've grown stronger, their spirits is stronger, they no longer struggle with the same things. Now, sometimes there is an increase of intensity, and that you end up feeling, phew. I mean, the last few Sundays, you know, I've either ended up on my face or standing, you know, lost in something, and really took a while to come out of it. You know, my whole soul and body was very, very sort of heavy in a sense from the experience, and it took me a while. I was glazed. You know, that sort of glazed over look when people want to talk to you and you're not really hearing them, and this sort of, because of the intensity of the experience, because it is going to another level, you know. So it's okay to sometimes just to feel that, but you do go stronger, and your spirit is able to engage, and your soul falls into line with it. So, you know, come to a place of rest, set the desires of your heart on it, and then just begin to re-engage your testimony of it and ask God to unveil what he wants to reveal to you. Because he's not wanting to take you through a difficult thing for the sake of it. You know, he wants to give you something. You know, if your angel is talking about creative light, you know, then what I wouldn't do, unless you were directed to, is go and Google search it and try and figure it out first. When you've got some revelation, often afterwards, then you find things that affirm that, and you find, wow, okay, yeah, that thing's there, or that scientific discovery is thing like that. So I always want to get the revelation from God, and then once I have revelation, then I find confirmation out there in what God's doing, because he's probably released it out there prophetically in some way, and people pick up prophetic things who are not even Christians, you know, and I can still learn from that, and I can still get the truth that's coming through that, you know, because sometimes people who are in the scientific field and they're seeking for a breakthrough in certain stuff are very open. You know, Einstein didn't get stuff by theorizing on a blackboard. His greatest breakthroughs came from creative things in his mind, you know. So yeah, that would be my encouragement. Make sure you're not striving, But know that God is doing this because He's got more to give you. And don't put a time on it either. Don't give yourself, oh well, I really need, because that will just create again a tension and a stress rather than a rest and a relaxation. I'm still pursuing things years later, and the timing of it adds to and adds to and adds to until eventually I get to a point where, oh right, now I understand in a more fuller way. But I've got bits of the picture along the way, so I have bits of the jigsaw puzzle. Sometimes God gives you the frame. This is the outside, so you get all the square bits, and then it's like, okay, now what? We'll have to find, because the outside bits are really easy to fit together. 4 corners are great. They only go in 4 different places. All the outside bits, well, where they're going to go. Everything on the inside of it actually can be like really, really hard to put together. So see it sometimes as God will give you bits of the puzzle in one season, and you get some more of the puzzle, and eventually you'll see, oh wow, here's the picture. And it's okay to have an incomplete picture, because you're on a journey of discovering what the picture is, not I need to know it at the beginning. It's unveiling it so that it actually, in the right time and season, you'll find that it will come, as long as you keep pursuing, but in a measured way. I'm much less, I need to know this now, than I used to be. So because my soul is no longer in charge, for most of the time. So that's really what enables me to relax and not have to strive into these things. And I find in doing that, because I journal everything, I can always go back. I can, like this time of the year when I'm really looking at what's God said, what is He saying, how do I put that together, what does all that mean? I have to go back over sometimes months of journals, and I'm sort of picking out, okay, yeah, that bit, that was something that relates to this, and this relates to that. And when I pull it together, I find in 4 or 5 months, God has said different things in different months, and I didn't really get a full understanding of it at the time, but now I see that they come together, and they were building on and adding to, so that now I think, oh right, now I can share that from a perspective of either I've experienced it already, or I understand what God is saying in a more cognitive way, that I was just experiencing something originally. So, I'm relaxed about that. I know that sometimes the things that He speaks over months will unfold and will be revealed as I continue to engage Him. And I don't need to know what January would bring when I'm in December. And I know people want to know everything in advance, but we only need to know day at a time in reality, because I'm only responsible for outworking today. And then tomorrow I'll be responsible for outworking tomorrow. But if I'm concerned about tomorrow today, then I'll run out of energy today to do what I'm called to do today. So anyway, so yeah, keep going. But I'm sure it'll be lots of really interesting things. So I'll be interested to hear your testimony of all the things that God reveals. And it's true for all of us, really. All of us, we're all on a journey, and all that jigsaw is being put together. And as long as we're okay with the progression of it, then God will do it. And actually, I found, the more or the less I needed to know, the more God actually showed me. It's one of those sort of paradoxes that, when I really wanted to know, and I was pressing to find out stuff, the motive for it wasn't pure, so I didn't get the fullness of what he could have showed me. As soon as I didn't need to know, then revelation became something that started to overflow. Which is why I had to sort of journal it all, because I couldn't contain it all. So yeah, awesome.
That's a great quote, Mike. I'm going to use that.
What was that?
The less I need to know,
the more He should. Oh right, yeah. Well, that's definitely been my experience. When my soul died, to being in charge in that area, and I had all the logical excuses of why I needed to know. Well, I'm going to need to teach people, I'm going to need to understand, otherwise I won't be able to share it with anybody else. And I had all those things, which are part of my redemptive gift. It was still motivated by the need for security in knowing, which once I dealt with, and I didn't need the security of knowing, and my trust in God was not about how much I knew about him, but just the fact that I was in a relationship with him, then it released him to unveil way more than I would have imagined or thought. But it is a journey, and you know, I've sort of, I feel much more relaxed on that journey than when I first started it out, you know, and I'm much less inquisitive and needing to know in my soul, but my spirit is so much more in a way of engaging and receives so much more, which then leads me, you know, rather than my mind being led from what I know by personal knowledge or experience. Actually, my spirit can lead me, and my mind catches up. You know, so most of my encounters are really spiritual, which eventually release revelation to my soul, my mind, in the right time. You know? And I found it much easier to share sort of my spiritual encounter through as I talk about it. And quite often, even in these sorts of sessions, you know, I find myself saying things that my spirit already knows, but I never really thought about it in those terms or said it in that way or really had that sort of concept before. You know, and I find that exciting because, you know, there's always something that's going to be unveiled, you know.
Would you suggest? I mean, that's a very powerful mindset in our culture, and we're all impacted in the West. Is that something as individuals you suggest perhaps needs to be addressed both in the court and as part of transformation? And suppose we're thinking about the teaching that you're doing, you know, going into the court and seeing how engaging with God there, and then also through something like the transformation series where we're, you know, living sacrifice and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's multifaceted, really. I think there isn't just one way. You know, when I guess when I look back, that in a way you try and do something, break it down into its component parts so people can understand how it fits together. So when I was doing my gateways, I was also doing the living sacrifice transformation thing alongside each other. So I was sort of flowing from the inside out, but I was looking to go deeper in. And so I put those together, but they're quite difficult to sort of teach because one's really about relationship and the other one's about responsibility. And so they're quite hard to teach, but the principles that you gain in one apply to both. So the same basic principles are there in terms of how you deal with those things that come up. But I think the most, as much transformation that, you know, took place in dealing with my gateways and cleansing them and removing familiar spirits and those things, and, you know, dealing with it down to a genetic level was great. But actually, it took an encounter in the dark cloud to really bring that into the fullness of what it was looking to leading up to. You know, and so I can remember, you know, one Sunday morning I was engaged in the presence of God, and I saw my scroll open, and I saw a picture on it of a flame, and it was a blue, really blue, intense flame, and I knew what it was. I knew it was called the Eternal Flame. I just knew that's what it was. And it was like, in an instant, my whole life flashed in front of my eyes up to this point. I couldn't see it, but it was like all my scroll had been unrolled up to this point, and then afterwards I really sensed everything would be different. So everything then just came out from that point in a completely different way. Although I couldn't I couldn't describe it or understand it. I just knew this was a significant event. I didn't know what it was, and things flashed into my mind. Walking into eternal flame. There was some film I watched when I was a kid called She with Ursula Andress. It was, I quite liked Ursula Andress, so it was quite an interesting film to watch. But it was walking into this flame in which she took on immortality, sort of in this eternal flame. So I had this picture, this image, that it was quite an intense thing. And then when I then got invited to go into the dark cloud and to engage God in that dark cloud, this event actually it reminded me this is what this was about. And that inspired me to be willing to go through the difficulty of it, because it was like 4 months of darkness, because it was like, okay, everything's leading up to this point, everything's going to be different after. So I was inspired to pursue and continue. But it was very much that brought my soul to a point of now it's revealed in darkness how much light it needs and how much actual cognitive understanding it needs, and that really brought it to a head from a point of this needs to die, and my ketubah was attached to that process, which can very much lead us into performance. Well, I'm going to do this for you and you're going to do that for me. And yes, there is the element of that, in covenant. What belongs to me is yours and what belongs to you is mine, and we're in this relationship, but it's not earned. It's not an earned thing. It's not well, if I perform you'll love me, and if I don't perform you won't love me. And so the ketubah, we have to be very careful. It's based on relationship, not performance. So it enhances the relationship rather than establishes the relationship. I already have a relationship. That's why I need a ketubah, not, well, I need a ketubah because it will make my relationship. So you have to get that whole perspective right. And so I found that when God was saying, do you trust me? Because that's what he was saying to me. Do you really trust me? I would have said before I went through that experience, of course I do. I've just had years of encountering you and whatever. And God was saying, actually, no, do you really trust me when you can't see? When you can't hear? When I'm no longer doing what I was doing before? Do you still trust me? So when I got to the point of actually, no, if you never did anything again, it would not affect my relationship with you. And I know if I never did anything again, it wouldn't affect my relationship with you and your relationship with me. That totally liberated me from the I need to know. And my soul needs to be informed so that it will go along with the process. And I became much more integrated and whole at that point. Now, all of what I did in transformation and communion and all the stuff I still do was all part of that. It helped leading up to that point and brought me to a point where I was able to engage that. I don't think I would have been able to engage that dark cloud and everything had I not gone through the gateway cleansing and the transformation process up to that point. Now, having experienced that, then how I then had the desire to share transformation came out of that. Hence, the whole transformation teaching came directly following that experience, because I wanted to share with others how you can get to this point, that you can have this life-changing encounter with God which enables you to go deeper, and that your soul would really almost like finally be laid to rest in that whole area for me. And that was the area for me. It may be totally different for other people, because their redemptive gift may be different. Someone else's redemptive gift may be mercy, and their whole performance comes from ministering to people. And it all to do with, and codependency can be a problem in that environment, where mine was knowledge. While I knew what God was doing, then I was really happy, and when I didn't know what God was doing, then did I trust him? Well, actually, no, I didn't, to the level that I would going to need to trust him in the future, so that he can entrust me with the revelation that I'm getting, because he knows I don't need it to affirm anything in our relationship. Our relationship is totally independent of knowledge and anything else. It's just our relationship. So that was a key time for me, in that everything came together, and everything has been different since. Without a shadow of a doubt, things have been dramatically different since, and I tangibly felt the difference of being unified soul and spirit, and the tension and the wrestling, I guess, of the soul with the spirit for control ended. It just felt so different, and subsequently everything then has enabled me then to engage in eternity, because I don't need to go there with my mind, and my experiences have become spiritual encounters rather than cognitive encounters. And that doesn't mean that I don't, when I engage God, shift focus of my soul to engage in it, but there are times when I have to just leave my soul to engage my spirit. So in eternity, you cannot take your soul there. Well, I can't, because my mind just cannot contain, because it's still stuck in linear perspective. I cannot engage eternity in that way. Others may be able to. For me, I can't at this point. So I don't even attempt to understand. I just go and bathe in it. I just become, encompassed around with eternity and just enjoy the experience. So yeah, I think it's just pursuing deeper intimacy with God, and be willing to deal with everything that hinders that intimacy, and use whatever tools you've got, whether it be lie busting or courts or anything else. I know if there's a disturbance within my soul, and that disturbance has maybe come to the light because of something that was hidden or whatever, then I know I can go to the court and I can actually find out why that disturbance was there. Then I can deal with it, and then I can then learn to deal with things which are beyond me, as an individual. Because if my spirit is growing, and the whole purpose of engaging the gateways and getting a flow, is that it would create an atmosphere around me. I'm practicing extending the boundary of where my spiritual authority is, and where I can spiritually connect with that boundary. So I extended my spirit around my home and my family. Now they're spread out all over the place. So it's not about a physical location as much as a sphere of influence. And so for me, that was where and then it was, okay, I'm going to extend that around the ecclesia, and then around our local area, and then around our region. And so I actually extend my spirit around, and I'm looking, therefore, what am I picking up in this atmosphere that I'm now engaged in, that I'm responsible to deal with. And I'm practicing that. I mean, I'm by no means there. I got very good at picking up in what was around the atmosphere around my life and within me, and now as it goes further, I'm sort of connecting up with other spiritual beings, if you like, my family, what's going on in their spirit, and if I'm going to connect with okay, am I responsible to do something on their behalf or whatever, then I sort of have to learn how to engage, what's going on in my town. Well, I don't need to know everything that's going on in my town. I only need to know that which I'm responsible for being involved with. So, but I need to tune into how do I pick that up, and that's, again, practice and focus, really, because I do extend my spirit every day, and I'm asking for that connection and that focus, So, and all that really has come as a result of becoming, integrated soul and spirit. And the more my spirit is engaged in the realms of heaven, in creative light, and the more it carries that frequency of heaven and the frequency of my eternal image, the more my soul then can resonate with that frequency and be transformed to align with it, or come into agreement with it and cooperate with the flow. Because if you don't have a flow, then you're stagnant, and stagnant is not very pleasant. It's got to be flowing for life. Stagnant water eventually produces no life, and ultimately you get the Dead Sea, because a whole load of stuff comes into it and nothing goes out of it. So yeah.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Okay. Does anyone else got anything they want to share?
Mike, on the legislation videos,
Yep.
you had a map of America with a cross through it for northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. Do you have one like that for the UK?
I do, yeah, and for Germany and a few other places. Essentially, it's a boundary. It's setting up a perimeter around the spiritually. I mean, it takes the shape of a map because it helps people to really see, but it's a spiritual map rather than a physical one, and it's about establishing the perimeter before engaging the center. And and I've done that in the US, and this year I will have completed that perimeter and going to those places, and looking to help them establish government and connect up those perimeters and begin to engage with each other. Then God spoke to me about the spine and the heart. So and I don't know exactly what that means for now, but He's spoken to me about once the perimeter is established, He will establish the spine and the heart. And so, yeah, it's something which, for myself, we're engaging with our own region to establish that government within our region, and I'm looking to connect with people who looking to establish government in their regions, and we can begin to start to find relationship and connection. So in a couple of weeks, we have a gathering, a regional gathering, which is about connecting with people who are hearing something from heaven and feel drawn to engage beyond the veil. So that will be a relational day of connecting people and joining people, and essentially just beginning to engage God together and see where we can see government established, and encouraging people to believe that God may well be calling them to establish some heavenly government on the earth. But it is something which I feel God is doing. I'm sure He's doing it with lots of people. But for me, there was a very clear mandate to see this as a pattern of what He was going to do in nations that I have some level of responsibility or mandate towards. So it was the US first for me, which is very strange. I mean, it was like, I never imagined that I would connect up with people in the US in the way I've done, before the UK. But there seemed to be, that's what God did, that's what He showed me, so that's where the things opened up. But now, I think we're catching on in the UK more. I think the whole legislative thing is beginning to be established, and I think God is stirring people to take responsibility for our nation and for the different regions, and therefore begin to establish government. The key is establishing government which sets the perimeters, and then you can then look to find the heart and the spine of what He's looking to do outworked. But yeah, so I do have a picture of it somewhere, a map. I'm not quite sure where it is, whether I've got it on this thing, but definitely had it given that way. and I have a number of things I'm working on in terms of legislating and calling into and beginning to seek for in that understanding. So, yeah.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike. Hiya.
Yeah, there's a young lady I'm working with.
There's a young lady I'm working with.
And I was just introducing live busting. I was just wondering whether I could share with her some of the code protocols.
Yeah, of course you can.
All right.
Yeah, they're not copyrighted. you can, in a sense, it's just revelation.
Yeah.
If you have your own personal testimony of the court process, then share your testimony with her. I mean, if you're saying, can you share with her, the Engaging God material, I would encourage you not to, because that's basically for people in the Engaging God program. But in terms of what you've learned from that and what your own personal testimony was and how you do it, then yeah, that's the whole point. Share whatever you have as your own personal revelation, so that she can experience that and be blessed by it. Yeah. So.
No, it was not the material. It was just
not the material. It was just. Well, in a sense, it's like the material is for those who are part of the Engaging God program. Your own personal testimony of having used that material and how you outwork it in your own life and everything else certainly is what you share, because in essence you don't want to share someone else's information. You want to share your testimony of that, which is then you have personal experience of it, and it's much better. It will come from you much better than it would be her listening to me in this instance. Now, if she engages the program, then that's all part of an ongoing process of where that will be built, upon previous experience and testimony of their own life in growing to get to the point where you're using that in your own life. But you can definitely share. The protocols are just exactly that, a protocol. You have your own protocol that you do, so share with her how you do it. That's the best thing.
Yeah, I was sharing with her about my personal experiences. In getting delivered.
Yeah.
So that's what I was working with her on.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, examples of the protocols are really just that. It's just an example of something you're already using and doing. So it's better when it comes from you using your own words and using the way you do it. Because whenever I share something like that, I'm not sharing it as this is the holy grail of this is the only way it can be done. It's like, no, this is an example of what I do. Make it your own and develop your own words and your own way of doing it. Otherwise, it will just become ritualistic. Even like, the transformation prayers of the communion prayers, I don't want people just to be parroting the prayers that I pray. They're mine because I've developed them and I share them so people can take the examples and make them their own. And so then you have your own way of sharing that, speaking that, talking to God about it, declaring, decreeing, because it's yours. Because there's only so far you can get with using someone else's prayers. I used some of Ian Clayton's stepping in things when I first started engaging this. I don't use them anymore because I've developed my own relationship with God through it. But they can be a helpful introduction. Then once you've developed them, then those prayers become yours and they become powerful because you're sharing your testimony of them. So when I go and step into a court and do a court protocol, I just say it the way I do it, rather than, okay, well, I use a set regime. Although I shared lots of examples of different types of court cases to give people an understanding. Look, there's lots of different ways you can do this, but I wouldn't, I would not want to be thinking that everyone was just saying the words that I say, because I said them. Make sure it becomes your own, because it goes back to the same thing before. You don't just want to be using information that I've given. You want to be using revelation that you've received and are living in, because that carries the power of testimony. So you can't share my testimony with any sense of authority and power, because it's mine. I can share it. You can share your testimony, which you got from listening to mine, and then that carries with it anointing and power because it's yours. So we all have to develop it for ourselves in our own way, because then it's real. I wouldn't expect people to use the same sort of language and terminology that I use, because I come from a sort of who I am, which is logical, scientific. In a way, I like to put things forward in a particular way because that's what makes sense to me and how I do it. But the principles are there. Make sure they become your own experience, and then your own testimony words that you use. Because I think a lot of people do get caught up. Well, if I don't say the right words, they won't work. And that's just fear and bondage. God is looking at the heart, not whether we got every T crossed or I dotted. It's like, am I coming with the right heart? Well, he will respond. Okay, yes, there are certain protocols in certain courts, so you need to understand what goes on, but it's not requiring an exact rendition of a particular statement of faith or particular words. It requires your heart engagement and your spirit to lead you, and then it will carry with it authority and power. So just share with her your own testimony and lead her through the process of being able to do that for herself.
Okay.
That's my encouragement.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay.